When COVID started, I was off work for about 2 months. Fortunately, I worked for a big company that paid us throughout, but I'm both the type that hates being cooped up and the type that loves money, so I took a temporary position at the nursing home where my mom worked. Got swabbed, all that. Once I was confirmed to be clean, I started the next day. They were desperate for the help. My mom and I didn't used to see each other very often, but when the family would get together, she'd tell stories about the residents who would often misbehave. No names, nothing like that, just the funny stories and, in the case of one guy, the scary stories. Now, my mom didn't mention names, but she had mentioned that this particularly creepy guy was considerably younger than the rest of the residents. I should clarify here that she mentioned this well before the idea of me working there had ever come up. Most residents were well into their twilight years, while this guy was in his mid-40s and in a nursing home because of a series of illnesses that had each caused brain damage. That said, he was still fairly lucid, just unable to properly take care of himself. Still, that didn't stop him from purposely shitting in his pants just so that he could have the nurses wipe his genitals while he'd say things like, "You should give me a blowjob," or "Are you going to rub some cream on my balls?" He never did it to the male nurses. He'd just sit silently while they cleaned him up, but it didn't matter if it was a 60-year-old female or a 20-year-old. He'd be as vulgar as he could, though he did seem to prefer the younger ones. He'd also, on occasion, tried to grab at the nurses. It got to the point where they wouldn't allow certain nurses to go into his room alone. Cue my arrival at the home. I don't have a medical background, as my only real job was to run shit back and forth for the doctors and nurses and to deliver food to the residents. One of which, of course, was the creepy dude. Let's call him Mark for the sake of simplicity. Now, as much as I hate to admit it, despite being an almost 30-year-old man, I'm probably what you'd call slender. I'm about 5 feet 11 inches. At the time, I was about 120 pounds. I also had hair halfway down my back. This is important. I also had a beard down to the middle of my chest. This is also important. I delivered to Mark multiple times. He'd seen me face to face. I'd never had an issue with him. Like I said, he didn't give the dudes issues. Until the one day he approached me from behind while I was bringing snacks around to some of the residents. I'm handing a snack to my absolute favorite resident, a sweet old lady who I'll call Wanda, 98 with a prosthetic leg and still full of life, and I hear, "Hey sweetie, come over here." It barely registers in my mind because there are a bunch of people around, and it's not uncommon to hear him pull that type of thing. Wanda and I kind of rolled our eyes at each other and waited for the vulgar bit. Then Wanda said, "Hey," and pointed behind me, and a second later I felt somebody squeezing the back of my arm. Hard. I spun around, at which point he saw who I was and he went paper white. Some of the real staff had seen it going on and dragged him back to his room. I was told to go on my break. Wanda and I had pudding together. Next time I saw him, he was still a dick, but didn't seem to hold a grudge. Not sure if he even still remembered it. Wanda and I continued to eat pudding and joke about the situation afterward. It was our regular, daily thing until I went back to my real job. I don't know what Mark's doing other than, as my mom, who still works there, says, still being an asshole. But Wanda's great-grandson is gonna graduate soon and she's super proud. I work overnight at a store. I'm a stoker, 25 female when I first started. A guy around my age got hired a couple of months after me. He started hanging around another coworker and I on break, and we eventually became friends, even hanging out alone on break sometimes. He seemed pretty normal at first, agreeable and a good conversationalist. He told me he was autistic, which I think helped me make excuses for him a bit in hindsight. I was in a bad place mentally at the time, and having someone validate me felt nice. At first. But then he started getting touchy. I would eventually be telling him more personal stuff, and he would start to rub my back. I didn't want to be rude at first, so I didn't say anything, but then he did it more often. I told him to stop, and he seemed to be sorry, until doing it again eventually. I was alone with him all these incidents, and the look on his face when he did, eventually, showed predatory vibes, not like the friend I thought I had. Around the time he started doing this, he also confessed to me something he did in the past to a friend of his. You can probably guess what it's along the lines of. He acted quite remorseful and said him and the friend are civil now, and that it was a long time ago. I think he also cried a bit. I'm generally a compassionate person who believes in second chances, so while this is when more red flags started going off, I still hung out with him a bit, although more distantly. It didn't help that his general demeanor is one of a pitiful person. Nice act. He hung out with my boyfriend, and I a couple times. He lives near us, so we were kind of excited to have someone to hang out with at first, but he just kept getting weirder and weirder the few times we hung out. He always seemed to be trying to subtly one-up my boyfriend in a sarcastic manner. There was also a strange time when he did a deep belly laugh at an explicit sexual song playing on his car radio that my boyfriend and I just felt kind of uncomfortable about. He'd make a point to not drink that much around us when we were drinking, despite bragging about how much he could down. He rubbed my back, yet again at one point while I was drunk when my boyfriend left the room, trying to pass off as comforting. He generally tried to be flirtatious whenever my boyfriend left the room. Eventually enough was enough, and I cut him off, although I still have to work with him. This was last summer. We weren't even friends for that long. Since then, he has come in early every night to put out my work stuff for me. Leaves me food and water and gifts, stuff that I've mentioned in conversations before. Parks near me and waits for me to leave the parking lot, so we can drive together, I guess. One time he waited a half hour as I was chatting with another coworker. Waits in front of his house for me to pass by him to get home. I have to turn on his road to get to my road. Still says weird phrases my boyfriend and I used. Texts despite being ignored. Left a note saying you really do hate me on my work card after months of ignoring him. He's written my full initials, which he remembers somehow, on a work card and marker, and leaves the same one out for me every day. I always try to erase them, even wrote stop on it once, but the next day I'll see he wrote them again. Oh, and whenever he walks by me, he looks sad or pissy. Managers have talked to him and a report is going through HR right now, but I just hope he doesn't escalate. Despite being talked to, he still leaves the cart and stuff out for me, with some water, and rewrites my initials. He's so helpful and nice. /S. Update. Nothing really has seemed to happen with HR so far, except for him no longer waiting for me in the parking lot. I guess the manager talked with him about that. I told him to stop leaving work carts out for me, and he acted like I was being unreasonable. Then he wrote my initials again on my work cart while I wasn't looking. He's fucking obsessed. This happened to me around the end of summer, beginning of autumn 2020, and I just remembered it again and decided to post it here. I got a new job at a store and I love this job to bits. After several terrible jobs, this place is a breath of fresh air. Lovely atmosphere, amazing coworkers, and most costumers are very sweet. I've never had a bad day at work until this particular day. So this was a day like any other. I was restocking some stuff and looking around if any costumers needed my help. Our bosses vary, with a lack of words, strict, about us making sure to always give the customers a lot of focus no matter the task we're doing. I put up the last few things on the shelf and turn around to find a man in his late 20s standing right behind me, staring. I put on my friendliest smile and ask him if there's anything I can help him with. He says in broken English that he needs help with some bug repellent or something, and I guide him to our shelf full of different brands, and we go back and forth about what he needs. He finally settles on a brand, and I ask him if there's anything else I can help him with. He asks for the way to the register. A lot of customers do this since our store is a bit of a labyrinth, and I give him a detailed description of the way there. He just looks at me puzzled, and I then ask if he needs me to walk him there, and he nods. I'm walking with him to the register, and he starts asking me questions, like if I enjoy my job and such. Normal questions that I answer politely. But then the questions got a bit more personal. He starts asking me about my age, where I live, who I live with, my work schedule, questions people don't really ask employees. Me, a very shy person who don't want to upset anyone, tries to answer his questions without actually answering them. We're almost by the register when he stops and turns to look at me, standing a bit too close for my comfort. I just stand there, visibly uncomfortable, as he says, "I'll be coming back tomorrow to pick you up from work." I laugh awkwardly and say, "I don't know if I'll be working tomorrow." He pauses for a moment before saying, "Then I'll just come by every day. We'll run into each other eventually." I laugh again, thinking he must be joking, but he is looking dead serious as I do. "We could be friends, you and I. I don't have many friends. You could be my friend," he says. He then walks off to the register all by himself as he obviously knew the way there, and I stand in place until I can't see him anymore. I look around for a coworker, and I spot my boss. I run up to her, breaking down as I tell her what just happened, feeling terrible for breaking down might I add. My boss asks who it was, and I spot him by the door and point to him. My boss walks over and talks to him. What was said I don't know because I went to the break room to calm down. So to the creepy costumer at my job, I hope to never see you again.